this desire for this stuff, I want to talk to you about this because I have a friend who has a nonverbal brother, severely autistic, can't take care of himself, has to be changed and, brought to the bathroom, et cetera.
Yeah.
Also somebody, if you dump a puzzle on the floor of 2,000 pieces, he can put it together in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Absolutely remarkable. But, needs and lives amongst people who have very similar, cannot be taken care of. It's very difficult. Yeah. And his sister sent the telepathy tapes to me. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. This was apparently one of the #1 podcasts in America last year. I mean, absolutely,
It was the number one.
It lit up the charts.
It surpassed Joe Rogan for like a certain period of time.
And who had the person on from the telepathy tapes talking about this. And then ultimately, the telepathy tapes, somebody says, well, I had mentioned this. It's like, oh, that's just a load of bullshit. And essentially what it is, it's about people with autism, right? So I think
I believe they all have autism.
And that they can communicate. And it's the exact same thing as your film. It's about these people who don't have the ability to communicate, but the belief is they have something inside that they're desperate to communicate. Yeah. And we're going to facilitate that. And in this case, there's a kind of telepathy aspect to it, which for me strikes me as complete bullshit, just off the top. Yeah. But in a sense, like there's a huge desire for this stuff to be true, right? I mean, your film is #1 on Netflix. This is the #1 podcast in America for the entire year. Yeah. When you go around talking to people about this and your own interest in this story, what is it about this kind of thing that really lights people up and say, in a way, I want this to be true?
Yeah. I mean, God, I think in the telepathy tapes, it's similar reasons. It's parents who long to have connection with their children, right? Yeah. And who struggled with lots of different methods for many years and they didn't work. And then here comes this thing that suddenly gives them this incredible intimacy, right?
Yeah.
And it's at a time, the telepathy tapes comes out at a time when one could argue that objective truth we're out of that era, kind of. And it's like we watch our 2 channels that mirror what we want to believe about the world, and that becomes the truth. And you can't pry anyone from it once they're too deep down that road.
In particular, to add something to that, is that has been developing for a long time when it comes to politics.
Sure,
I mean, the rise, particularly of Fox News in the mid-'90s, as a kind of counterattack to what the mainstream media was, and then it goes back on the other side of MSNBC. But I think one of the things that is interesting for your film, and now in this moment, is that it has overtaken conversations about health too. I mean, the head of HHS is somebody who believes that vaccines cause autism, that there are chemtrails, that HIV just doesn't cause AIDS, and he is the head of Health and Human Services.
Totally.
The largest. I mean, this is wild. I mean, so when I'm sitting there thinking, hey, this has been debunked in the 90s. I mean, you mentioned it in the film, then I went and watched it. Frontline did an episode in 94? About 60 Minutes, and Morley Safer did an episode about the exact same thing.
It was 3 years after the method had been introduced into the United States. Frontline debunked it 3 years later.
Very quickly.
And
it's quite easy to debunk, too.
Right. Well, interestingly, though, I mean, Howard Shane, who did the debunking, had to come up with a test that would really prove it. But it's one of those issues where people will say, well, and they say this in the telepathy tapes, too, if you try to test it, you're being ableist. And it makes them very uncomfortable. And, of course, they're not going to perform well under that kind of stress and pressure to get the right answer. And Howard Shane, who's, I think he's assessed over 40,000 people in his career. He made the device that Stephen Hawking used to be able to communicate when he lost all of his other.
Guy.
No. He said something nice, which sums it up, which says intelligence will out, right? It's human nature that if you can communicate with the world, you will. There's nothing that's going to stop you. No anxiety from being tested is going to stop you from making that connection with the world that you've longed for. It just won't. There's nothing. And so for him, it was But you get called ableist. It happened, Ky Dickens in the Telepathy Tapes, when a number of journalists who have now questioned it, she has said it's ableist, to question it, right? So it's like...
I don't even understand it's ableist to say, is this supposedly scientific phenomena, is this real?
It's just a way to silence the critique and the debate around it, because you're so deep into it, and you can't... The idea that your number one podcast is based on pseudoscience, and even the scientist that is on the journey with her distance herself and calls it pseudoscience. Like the
not in the
documentary. No, but they don't talk anymore. She's claims that her career as a scientist was impacted by the kind of just recklessness of the podcast, and yet, more and more articles are coming out about it, right? And what it really is. There's different methods. It's all part of the same universe. Spelling to communicate, RPM, and facilitated communication. It's all essentially part of the same universe of pseudoscience. There are still Hollywood production companies that are throwing themselves at her to make
this
the
into a series.
Documentary, probably a fiction, as well. And she claims she's sort of said no to them because she doesn't want anyone looking over her shoulder giving her notes, right? Because it's essential that she be in total control of this concoction,
There is a thing that everyone should pay attention to when pseudoscience is debunked, and it can never be truly debunked because people want to believe.
Correct, yeah.
It's always something that has been said in a counter in the world of magic before.
Right.
And the example of this is Uri Geller, the Israeli spoon bender, who very famously went on Johnny Carson's show. Johnny Carson himself was a magician started his career in Nebraska as a magician, and hated frauds and liars. And he got James Randi, the magician, who called himself the honest liar. I'm going to lie to you and trick you, and I'm going to tell you that I'm doing it, to say, hey, he's going to come out here in the 70s, the height of this stuff. He's going to do his spoon bending. Come and see if we can see how he does it. Yeah. And Randy understands how it's done, replaces all his spoons, and he's humiliated on television. Right. Enormous humiliation. Yeah. What does he say? He says, I'm getting bad vibes in here. Right. The vibes are, you can't, this is not the right environment for it. Exactly. I can do it, but it has to be, it's like, no, your spoons were replaced.
Exactly.